What's our intent, right? If we're going to preserve the services and supports for people.
Reflecting on the budget herself just a few days ago at an interview in her office,
It was really a big win for the people of Minnesota.
Representative Hortman also praised the legislature's bipartisanship and promised Minnesotans more of the same in years ahead.
They expect their government to work, and it is going to do that for them.
Hortman worked side by side with Republican Speaker Lisa Demuth all session, and today Demuth said in a statement that she is devastated by the loss and that Hortman was respected by everybody at the Capitol. Danny Spiewak, KARE 11 News.
Wow, Lou, it still seems unreal. I mean, when you really think about what happened overnight, it just seems unreal. And yesterday, of course, it was a chaotic day of coverage. The story was developing rapidly. We kept getting new details, and every new detail was seemingly more jaw-dropping than the last. And we learned a lot about this main suspect, 57-year-old Vance Belter, throughout the day. Lou, you were following it and getting information from your sources. I wonder if you could take us through the timeline of when this all started unraveling yesterday.
Right. So the initial police call from Champlin, where Senator Hoffman and his wife were shot, that was about 2 a.m. And so officers responded to that at about 2 a.m., began investigating, of course, getting them medical care. I've since learned, of course, that there's cautious optimism on both of their their conditions. And one piece that I've learned since then is that the bullets missed vital organs. So very luckily,
miracle.
Both of them shot multiple times, getting hit in the arm and so forth.
And clearly, fairly close range. I mean,
Right.
This was inside their house.
And you would have to presume that the suspect thought that he had killed them when he left, right? But miraculously, they both survived. From there, a full hour and a half later is when this call in Brooklyn Park at the home of Melissa Hortman and her husband took place. The police responding just thought of the idea to go check on Representative Hortman.
Can I ask you a question here? Because this occurred to me. They had a mid-20-year-old daughter in the home at the Hoffman house. Yvette threw her body over her daughter to protect her. I mean, it just gives you chills to think about it. And I wonder if he said anything in that moment to make them think this is politically motivated and maybe we should check another house. Because to me, to have the forethought of this is a lawmaker, we should go see if there are other lawmakers in the area is pretty extraordinary.
Yes, and that's something, because we have, the other surviving witness there.
Correct.
Who could provide information to police. And so we don't know what the daughter was able to give them.
Or if he said anything at all when he went on this rampage.
One other thing to note, because later when the pictures came out, we saw that very disturbing mask that he was wearing.
So chilling. I don't know if we
dressed
have that.
as a law enforcement officer. It's one of those ultra realistic latex masks that have become more popular in the last few years.
It's like a horror movie, truly.
It absolutely looks straight off of a horror movie. And like Chief Mark Bruley described, he looked very much like a police officer with the tactical vest, some items on it, such as a taser, dressed in dark blue, the way that a police officer would, and drove his vehicle, which is a former law enforcement vehicle, right up to the front with the red and blue lights blinking. So,
and apparently handmade plates that said police on the front.
So, we don't know how each moment took place, but you have to imagine that they believe that this was a police officer, at least to a certain extent, when they're awakened in the middle of the night.
Right.
From there, so that's a full hour and a half. At 3:35, an officer responding there found the vehicle parked in front of the Hortman house and the suspect coming out. They say the suspect fired shots at the police officer. Police officer returned fire, and the suspect made it through the house, and they're confident that he escaped out the back of the house.
Can I stop you there for a second, too? Because there were a lot of questions and a lot of, on social media, anybody can say anything. But people are wondering, how in the world could this guy escape from law enforcement? Do we know how many officers responded to that scene? Was it just 2?
At that time, all that we knew at that time was just 2.
Yeah.
So we don't know if there were any more than that.
And they were fired upon.
And here's the thing: you're getting fired upon. You don't necessarily chase somebody into a house because you don't know what else is in there.
Exactly.
That's just police
or even
101.
around the back of the house when you don't know how many people are involved either.
Exactly.
They didn't know it was just one guy.
Exactly.
But I just wanted to talk about that for a second because people are saying, how in the world did this guy get away?
People can say anything they want, but
Exactly.
it makes perfect sense the way that it played out.
You're being fired on. It's the middle of it. It's dark outside, and it's completely chaotic. I'm sure they were taken by complete surprise that he was there.
And they took a risk by dragging Melissa Ortman's husband out of the house and attempting life-saving measures before realizing that he was already dead. And at that point, you know, they didn't necessarily they didn't enter the house again after that until they had a drone that would be able to take a look.
Yeah, because all they knew is he went back in the
area.
house. They didn't know that he clearly had run out of the back of the house.
Right.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
So from there, we heard from the neighbor, not the neighbor, the roommate slash friend, believes that Vance Belter made it back to that North Minneapolis house at around 6 a.m. At some point, he was able to access a vehicle, which we know to be a Buick. We don't know whose vehicle it is exactly. And
or if
there,
he had permission to use it?
That we don't know. Those are open questions right now. We've shown surveillance images of him with the cowboy hat. He obviously was able to change clothes. I'm told that at least one of those surveillance images came from a bank where he withdrew money.
Wow. So
that timeline, we don't know what time those surveillance images are from, but it was that morning after 6 a.m.
Here's another thing we found confusing when we were covering this live yesterday. The roommate, one of the roommates at least, said that they alerted police when they realized what happened. And yet the police use a ramming device apparently to get into the house. Can you make sense of that?
No, I don't. Because I don't know the timeline of that exactly. Remember, we didn't hear the official details of what had happened until about 9:45 a.m. So he had already been back to the house and had left 3 hours before that, more than 3 hours. So we don't know exactly how that all played out, but they got a search warrant to get into the house, you know, rammed in there. And, you know, just, again, knowing how investigations work, even with the cooperation of those roommates, they might not know for sure who may or may not be involved.
Cooperating with him,
and
correct.
So they can't take everything
at face
value. So they did, and they did not enter that home until later in the afternoon. So several hours had passed at that point. It was around 3 p.m. or so that the FBI released those photographs that we've been showing. So quite a period of time there where the authorities knew what they were looking for, but it wasn't necessarily public information yet until they asked for the public's help. Also during that block of time, Governor Walz was speaking at about 9:45 a.m. and the stop of Vance Belter's wife occurred sometime shortly after that, between like 10 and 11 a.m.
Oh, it's interesting.
And
we
so
didn't know that yesterday.
So they had made contact, but they didn't actually find her and where she was until they found her in Onamia in, I believe, Mille Lacs County, sometime between 10 and 11:30 a.m. So that's when that took place.
And so when they were saying we're talking to people of interest, she would have been one of those people. Not saying that she was involved or knew anything about it, just saying she's someone that's so closely tied to this case. We're going to interview her and see what she knew or didn't know. And again, lots of rumors floating around on social media about what the officers found in her car.
Right.
What can we confirm?
We can confirm that it was her and other family members in a vehicle, and I have confirmed through source that there was some communication in the form of text messages that Vance Belter sent his wife that requires more investigation, whether she knew anything about what he was planning, or when he sent her the text messages, whether she would know what he had done. So without going, you know, any more detail into what we're not able to report, that is kind of where that stands, with an open question regarding Vance Belter's wife, Jenny.
Well, it's so tragic. They have 5 children. You know, the Hortmans have 2 adult children. Hoffmans have 1 daughter in her mid-20s. And, you know, here you've got 5 children involved in all of this mess. It's just so sad. So they talked to her, did not detain her. She's not in custody.
You could say that they detained her, but they wouldn't let her leave until they had talked to her, but they did not arrest her. They did not bring her to the jail and place her
And we don't know
under
where
arrest.
she is or where that stands right now.
I did touch base with her this morning. After I reached her over the phone, she hung up on me. And so we know that she's not in custody.
All right. And then that leads us to...
Well, so remember the Buick issue.
Yes.
Eventually, the investigation extended into South Dakota, at least in the form of what they call a BOLO, which would be on the lookout, putting information out to law enforcement across South Dakota regarding a Buick, which was registered in another man's name. Don't know if that man is connected in any way, but other than the fact that this vehicle's registered in his name. And they were asking authorities in South Dakota to be on the lookout for this vehicle, which was a Buick. And then fast forward to this morning, they found the cowboy hat, they found a Buick that they believe was his car, the car that he was in.
On Highway 25 in Sibley County, about
not too far from his house.
5 miles from a property we know he owns, presumably his house in Green Isle, Minnesota, which is about an hour southwest of the Twin Cities. And we know that a neighbor said he heard a couple gunshots.
Yes, and that is something that they're investigating. You know, we don't, I guess, they didn't confirm that there were indeed gunshots. They confirmed to me that, yes, we're investigating this report of gunshots.
And right now, that brings us up to where we are right now. Thank you so much, Lou. That was really helpful. And, you know, this massive police presence in this very bucolic community, about 600 people, less than that, live in Green Isle where he owned a property. You can see there's a massive police presence, and they've been there for several hours. We heard this morning they found that vehicle, I think about 6 a.m. The call went out that they believed they had the suspect's vehicle that was just on the side of the road and about 200 yards away, according to Joe McCoy, who's been on scene there for hours. That hat was that cowboy hat that appears to be the same hat that was in the picture taken outside a bank in Minneapolis yesterday morning. It appears to be his hat. But we know that law enforcement right now is going around to properties and knocking on doors, and they're wanting to go through properties, make sure everybody is okay, first of all, make sure he's not hiding in any of these places, and just see if anybody knows anything or has heard anything that would lead them to this 57-year-old Vance Belter. We know that he obviously successfully got into the homes of Senator Hoffman and Representative Hortman, but there are a lot of other people on that list. He had a hit list that was found in his vehicle, and we were led to believe yesterday by law enforcement that there was a manifesto and a hit list. Lou, today it seems like maybe that was more of a combined list. Not necessarily, when you think of a manifesto, you think of pages and pages and pages of someone, writing out their political philosophies or grievances. It doesn't appear to be the case with this so-called manifesto.
Right, absolutely. And as we talk about this, just a quick note that this is brand new drone video that we're just getting in, shot very recently here. It's not live video, but it was shot very recently of what the police presence is and their movements there at the scene of this manhunt.
Yeah, and important to point that out, that throughout our coverage, we will not be airing live video of police movement, because obviously that could put them in harm's way. So it's always going to be on a delay. It is not what is happening at this moment, but it is, this was drone video and a perspective that we hadn't had earlier today until we got that drone up in the air. But again, not live. It's a great point to make, Lou. So we know so many lawmakers' names, both state lawmakers and our U.S. congressional delegation. Those names were on the list, as well as we understand some Planned Parenthood locations and things that would tie the list, or if you're trying to make sense of what that list was, with the abortion issue.
Yeah. I think that we've confirmed that he was very anti-abortion. And as far as the hit list, if we could call it that, so the way that this came up was when the officer caught him by surprise at the Hortman residence, he didn't have time to get in his vehicle and get away. So that's how police got his vehicle. Inside the vehicle, we showed an image at one point of a number of flyers that said "No Kings" on it, which was in reference to the protest that was being planned. Apparently in reference to that massive protest that was being planned. And then on top of that, what they called a manifesto, but none of this has been publicly released regarding what it said or anything, but I'm understanding that it may be more accurately like a list of names. And some of the names, we're sharing, what those people who are on the list have confirmed with us.
Right.
And that includes Tina Smith and Amy Klobuchar, U.S. senators. And it includes the victims in this case. There are a few more names. Let me put it this way. I know of a few more names that I'm not able to share yet that I think would be surprising that they're on the list. Like, it doesn't, if you're trying to make, elected or maybe former elected officials. Okay. And it doesn't make sense if you're trying to make sense of it. Which adds to
that whole narrative that this may have been about abortion.
Right. Well, and so there are those abortion locations that is definitely included on there, but like some former officials, elected officials that don't necessarily have a lot to do with Melissa Hortman or Senator Hoffman.
All right.
So there were 70 names on it. So it's a pretty expansive list.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's new. 70 people. And so law enforcement trying to protect those 70 people until they can get this man into custody and find him.
Some of them, immediately were left their homes for safety.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. You just can't imagine psychologically and emotionally what it does, not only to the people who were on that list, but also to their families.
Yeah.
You know, we talked to former Governor Tim Pawlenty yesterday, and he's always very well-spoken and thoughtful. And he was governor in 2002 and 2006, and he talked about how even back then, they were getting death threats. And anytime you put yourself in a public position, you realize that there is going to be that downside that goes along with it. That's scary for sure. Usually it's just words. People don't act on it. But how much that has escalated since 2020 and how many more threats come in constantly to these lawmakers or anybody in the public
And it also
eye.
makes it harder to distinguish what is a threat that is valid, that could be acted upon, and what's just a wild threat. And of course, both are disconcerting. But that's another thing that they have gotten,
They've got to wade through it.
Gotten used to wading through along the way.
Let's take a listen. We do have that sound from Tim Pawlenty. I just thought he was just so insightful and thoughtful yesterday. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I was just stunned. It's almost like something out of a bad horror movie, the facts of this. And I'm so sad, and I'm sad for the Hortman family, and I hope and pray the Hoffmans come through this after the surgery okay in terms of their medical recovery. And then I also just feel bad about how Minnesota's sort of civic and political fabric seems to be so torn, and our tradition of great civility seems to be slipping away. And I hope we can all find a way to get back to a better place. Well, things have become more and more polarized, but even when I served, and I was a state legislator and of course governor, and many death threats. I lived part-time in a suburban home in Eagan, not in the governor's residence, sometimes with security, sometimes not. Many times answering the door, or a family member having to answer the door if I was gone. And you have a lot of people out there who say and do threatening things, and it's going to have a chilling effect on our discourse, on our political leaders, but importantly also their families. Can you imagine being the child or a spouse, a significant other of a political leader in this environment? You know, every time you open the door, every time you go to the grocery store, you don't know who is just going to question you or who might harm you.
Yeah, our thoughts really go out to all of our elected leaders this morning as this saga continues. Now, a lot of people in Sibley County, they woke up to this alert. We'll show you on your screen right now that they located what they believe to be the shooter's vehicle near Highway 25. They're telling people still in Sibley County, stay in your homes with your doors locked, keep your cars secured so that he cannot use any of these places to hide. And that, of course, they want anyone to report any suspicious activity to 911. They did let the community know that they would be going door to door, and we saw some video of that earlier, our new drone video of officers approaching various properties to question the people inside and make sure they're okay, and search the properties and make sure that he's not trying to seek refuge in any of them. Our Joe McCoy has been live in Sibley County near the scene of where they found that vehicle for hours already this morning. Joe, what are you seeing right now?
Julie, we are still seeing that incredibly large police presence here along Highway 25, where that car was found, where that cowboy hat was found, where there's also a property down there. Now, I do think one thing that has been interesting, Julie, and you and Lou were talking so eloquently about how he could have potentially gotten away from Senator or Representative Hortman's home in the middle of the night after he and law enforcement exchanged, allegedly exchanged some gunfire. I also think there's a large question of how he then escaped from the home and then got to Minneapolis, and then seemingly got from a Minneapolis to out here in Green Isle. That car that law enforcement is saying is the suspect's vehicle. We do not know if that car is registered to the suspect, but he did come out here and then leave that vehicle right off the side of the road here on Highway 25, and then also there was that cowboy hat that we have not had it confirmed if that is Vance Belcher's cowboy hat, but it does look remarkably similar to the one that he was wearing in that photo that was captured by security cameras. So that car and that cowboy hat have been here the entire morning when my photographer and I arrived on scene here around 8:45. We do not know, however, how long that car and that cowboy hat have been here for. We do not know if that car that law enforcement is saying was or not was his car, because we don't know if it's exactly Belcher's car, but a car that he was driving. We do not know when he got out of that car and ditched it on the side of the road. And if that is his cowboy hat, we do not know when that cowboy hat was then put on the side of the road. So still lots of questions, Julie, as this scene behind us continues to develop, and the law enforcement presence has only ratcheted up this afternoon, Julie. We have seen multiple canine units, we have seen multiple SWAT units arrive on scene, numerous agencies, too much that I can even list, have arrived on scene here. So it's just been continuing to develop throughout the afternoon, and I would say the latest development, Julie, is what you and Lou have already discussed about those tactical teams and law enforcement going from home to home in the area searching properties. So that emergency alert that was placed and that we all received on our phone around 10:45, we have not received an alert to say that emergency alert is no longer in effect. So we have to assume that emergency alert is still in effect, where law enforcement is telling people, to stay in their homes, make sure their doors are locked, and all things of that nature. And that is as law enforcement is going home to home out here in Green Isle, searching properties for what we would believe would be Vance Belcher. I want to be very clear, we do not know if Vance Belcher is down this road here on Highway 25, where there's very large police presence. We do not know what authorities are exactly looking for. We can just report what we have seen throughout the morning and early afternoon. Julie.
And Joe, this is Lou here. I have a question for you, just so our viewers kind of understand how we receive some of this information. There are official press conferences and interviews that have been done periodically, and then a lot of these tidbits that we've been able to get come from sources that we've been able to individually contact. I'm wondering, Joe, I know you've been there a few hours already this morning. Has there been any sort of press conference there or any sort of official information relayed from authorities? And if not, have you been told if they plan to at any point?
No, we have not. There has not been any press conference, Lou. Neither have we been told if they are planning to hold one. To bring some transparency to our viewers, the reason that my photographer and I came down here to Green Isle again around 8:45 in the morning was because we heard on police scanners that potentially law enforcement had located a vehicle and had located this cowboy hat along the side of the road. So that's why my photographer and I made the 45 or so minute drive from the Twin Cities here up to Green Isle. But no, we have not heard any official word from law enforcement about the operations that they are conducting back there, or if they have found anything yet. And we have not been able to talk to anyone yet on if there is going to be some sort of official press conference later this evening, Lou.
All right, thanks, Joe. And it looks like at least a mile or two of Highway 25 is completely blocked off to the public down there.
All right, Joe.
Yeah, it's a large section. I can't give a great estimation. Oh, excuse me. I just want to say I can't give a great estimation of how large there is this section of Highway 25 that is blocked off, but it is a considerable amount, Lou, for sure.
All right, thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. We'll check back in a little bit. We want to remind people that if you have any information, this is the tip line that's been set up by the BCA. If you know anything about Vance Belcher, where he may be, have any information that could help them find him, there is a $50,000 reward right now from the FBI. So there is that tip line to call if you think you have any useful information in this case. It is going to, when they find him, it is going to be a great relief for so many people across the state, particularly our elected officials. We're really thinking about them today, as this man who had a hit list with, as Lou said, 70 names on it, is still on the loose. So the large law enforcement presence, obviously understandable, especially when you consider the fact that he did open fire on officers when they came across him in Brooklyn Park. And that's such a massive area, not highly populated, but just so much ground to cover in Sibley County to look for this man. And it's a fascinating discovery this morning that what appears to be his cowboy hat was found on the side of the road on Highway 25. Lou, of course, everything in this day and age begets a conspiracy theory, but a lot of people questioning, really, that hat was just sitting there on the side of the highway, almost as if it was just planted there. It's just one of those things that as more information becomes available, answers will be forthcoming, I am sure.
But you know what? Also,
but it is stunning.
These images of him wearing the hat came out. He obviously didn't take any precaution to hide the vehicle he was in. It looks like he got out of the car, dropped the hat, and then went wherever he was going from there.
Well, and also, it's interesting to me that he went to a bank to withdraw money, which is where we understand we got those pictures from, where you see him in the hat. Obviously knew that he would be on security cameras if he's going to a bank.
And not just that, it is another contradiction, because if this was something that he planned out so thoroughly, why would he need to go withdraw money ahead of time after, you know, doing these shootings? So again, somebody who's probably not thinking clearly, and
not a
when you try to make
necessarily.
sense out of it, then that's when these contradictions come up, and that's why those conspiracy theories are not worth it, because you're not dealing with somebody who's thinking in a straight line.
Right. This is not a rational person that we are talking about. We have seen all kinds of theories and things online, but it is pretty stunning to me how much information actually the FBI and the BCA have released. Sometimes in these investigations, things go on for a very long time without them sharing any information at all.
I think it's that immediate danger to public safety.
Yeah.
You know, people need to know what this guy looks like
and what he's capable of
in case he happens into their property. I mean, it's as simple as that.
And oftentimes in the situation where we were at the North Minneapolis property, after law enforcement had literally taken a battering ram and opened the front door and had searched that property, oftentimes in situations like that, the people who live in the house don't want to talk to us. We know even more because the man who says he's been best friends with Vance Belter since 4th grade was willing to talk. And it was really moving to watch him when he was sitting on his front porch and he read out loud the last text that he had received from Belter. He got incredibly emotional. You can only imagine how confusing and upsetting this is for him as well, especially since he said he really hadn't talked about politics. This was not a guy that was constantly venting and ranting about what was going on, say at the state legislature or at the national level, or even on the subject of abortion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure to the best friend, it's not just, you know, heartbreaking what happened to the victims. To that guy, it's heartbreaking that somebody that he thought he knew so well would be capable of doing something like this, and nothing will ever be the same again.
Absolutely. We have our Morgan Wolf standing by right now. She is at the Emergency Operations Center, a busy place yesterday. Lots of information coming out of there. So far today, we haven't received word that I'm aware of that there will be any press conferences. Morgan, what can you tell us?
Julie, I've been here for just over an hour. We haven't received any updates if they have any press conferences planned, but I can tell you that we were told we will get an hour notice, so plenty of time for us to plan and get organized here. We've actually had crews here at the State Emergency Operations Center since midnight, and so we've been patiently standing by and just ready to go whenever investigators have any information that they want to share with us. And I heard you guys talking about BCA investigators and you know, state emergency situations like this, you know, they tend to be a little bit more tight-lipped, and FBI, BCA, and so the fact that they have shared so much information and giving us that opportunity to relay it to the public is pretty unique in this situation because of the particular public threat right now with Belter still on the loose. So we are waiting by to hear if they have any new updates at all. We were told the significant updates in the case will come from people here at the State Emergency Operations Center. And as we saw yesterday, very, very significant updates came exactly from this building that I am standing in. And so we are patiently, like I said, just waiting by and ready to go at any moment they need us. Back to you.
And Morgan, this is Lou here. Like you mentioned, there's information officially coming from that location. There's dozens and dozens of authorities at the scene of the manhunt. Can you share with us who do you know as far as different law enforcement entities that might be there that we could hear from today?
From today, as far as I know, We have been just in contact, if I'm being honest with you, with their communications team, with DPS, Department of Public Safety, and so we haven't heard from anyone from BCA or FBI quite yet. But I think right now at this point, DPS is going to be our direct contact, and they've been kind of checking in with us periodically and telling us that they don't have any press conferences planned. But as soon as they do have something planned, like I said, we're going to be ready to go. Actually, I do want to bring up something that I did see on social media, though. As we are talking about this case, and time again, we have mentioned how horrifying and chilling it was that Belter disguised himself as a police officer. We now have our local police departments like Maple Grove and St. Anthony putting out warnings to their residents to be vigilant and make sure that you can properly identify anyone from their agency. And so I thought that was just pretty significant, I guess you could say, something I've never personally seen before, that we have our local agencies warning their residents to look for exactly what their officers dress as and the vehicles that they drive.
Oh, it's so sad. I mean, yeah, everyone is on edge until this man is caught, that's for sure. All right, we know you'll be standing by there for us, and if there are any updates at all coming from the Department of Public Safety, the FBI, or the BCA, we know you'll be standing by for us. Thanks so much, Morgan. We appreciate it. A lot of people on edge as this manhunt continues, none more so than the people who hold elected office for our state. This morning on NBC's Meet the Press, Senator Amy Klobuchar, who has confirmed she was one of the people on that so-called hit list, she talked about the latest on the search for the suspect.
Well, for a while, they believed that he was in one certain area, and he may have been there for a while, so they had thousands of homes in a shelter-in-place situation. Now they are continuing to look, and so the FBI is asking for the public's help with a $50,000 award. You've got many images of them. To me, the most chilling image is the one where he is apparently wearing some kind of mask. It's a doorbell camera, like so many people have, but it's the doorbell right before he killed our friends. And so that was that image, and then later they saw him with the cowboy hat, out and about. And so he is somewhere. They are looking for him everywhere. He is smart. He was able to, imposture a police officer, soup up a car so it seemed like a police car. And so I know law enforcement has been very clear about this, that people should not approach him, but they should immediately call the tip lines and report, because we believe he's somewhere in the vicinity and that they are going to find him. But right now, everyone on edge here, because we know that this man will kill at a second. We also know that he is clearly off balance, that from the manifesto on, some of his writings, some of the things that he has said recently, that he is someone that no one should mess with except for law enforcement.
All right, we know Senator Klobuchar, clearly she's got to be shaken up by all of this, but also not just for her own safety, but of course that former House Speaker Melissa Hortman was a friend of hers. Both of them have been involved in politics and leaders in the DFL in this state for decades. Here she spoke about what made former Speaker Hortman so special.
We started out together in politics, moms with young kids, and somehow she was able to balance getting to know every door knock, every house in her district, while raising two children, Girl Scout leader. She taught Sunday school, and maybe all that juggling made it easier for her as she worked her way up in the legislature and became this extraordinary Speaker of the House, ushering in everything from free school lunch to working with the governor and other leaders to do some landmark legislation on paid family leave, to this year working with her Republican counterpart when we pretty much had a tied legislature to get the budget done. That's Melissa Hortman, my friend. And when you think about political violence and the statistics of political violence, you've got to realize the people who are behind it and a true public servant that we lost.
Oh, wow. You can really hear the emotion in her voice. Our heart goes out to Senator Klobuchar, all of Representative Hortman's friends, and of course, she and her husband Mark's two grown children. Can't even imagine the grief they had today and will have for forever. you know, Senator Klobuchar mentioned that Representative Hortman was involved in so many things, and she was always juggling so many things. This is a post, this is one of the other things that she was involved in and did and helped in serving her community. This is a social media post from Helping Paws Minnesota that obviously she worked with this group to help them train dogs, to help people. And they said, this morning we learned of the tragic and senseless death of former Speaker of the House, Melissa Hortman, and her husband, Mark. Melissa served her community in more ways than one. She was a Helping Paws foster home trainer, a neighbor, and a friend. The Hortman family raised and trained Minnie, who is now a working service dog partnered with a veteran. They also helped raise and train Gilbert, a service dog in training who was eventually career changed and became a cherished member of their family. At this time that they posted this, they did not know Gilbert's condition, but our understanding is that the shooter also shot and killed the dog as well. They said, we are holding Senator John Hoffman and his wife in our hearts and wishing them a full and speedy recovery. Our deepest sympathies go out to their families, their loved ones, and everyone grieving this unimaginable loss. We remember Melissa for her kindness, compassion, and unwavering commitment to making the world better, both in public office and through her work with Helping Paws. Absolutely tragic. But just goes to show you that this was a woman that was really a powerhouse. A wife, a mother, a neighbor, a friend, and a leader in the DFL party in our state. Another person that knew her and worked alongside her in the DFL for decades was U.S. Senator Tina Smith. Here's what she had to say about the former speaker.
My friend Melissa, who I cannot believe is gone, and I'm bereft, and I'm grateful to have a chance to tell people who didn't know her what a wonderful person she was.
All right, so a lot of heavy emotions, and I think it took, maybe still is taking people time to process what actually happened and the fact that the speaker and her husband are actually gone. We know the Hoffmans right now are in the hospital recovering from surgery. Both of them sustained multiple gunshot wounds. It's truly a miracle that they did survive. We were told by a family member yesterday that one of the bullets pierced very near to Senator John Hoffman's heart, but did not pierce his heart. They both came out of surgery. We were updated that Yvette Hoffman was alert and communicating, and we know that she was exchanging texts with John Croman, who is our longtime political reporter, and that you know, she had said there's still a really long road ahead. You can imagine they both had 8 or 9 gunshot wounds, various parts of their body that are now going to need to be repaired. But we know throughout the state and the country, lots of thoughts and prayers going up for that family. Let's take a little turn here. We're hopeful that they will apprehend this suspect, 57-year-old Vance Belter, and that they will do it soon, because there's so much fear still in the hearts of so many, particularly our elected leaders, that he's still on the run with a hit list of 70 people on it. What happens to him? What kind of charges would he face? What would that road look like for him?
Well, I think the authorities are hoping that he can be captured alive so that he can be prosecuted and doesn't take the easy way out, so to speak.
Correct.
That happens so often in
cases where
like
they
this.
know there's not a lot of hope
Right.
for their future.
I do know that the federal prosecutor's office is ready to file charges. They already have them ready. And this is a case that terrorism could be charged and would carry the death penalty. So
because it's a federal case. So there's a misunderstanding that they would be Minnesota charges, therefore he could not face the death penalty.
I believe that the Hennepin County Attorney's Office can charge him as well, and they are probably fully prepared to do that. However, it's one of these cases that could be used in federal court, and President Trump has already said that will happen, with the DOJ.
They will seek those charges.
And so if he is charged, if he is captured alive, and if he is charged in federal court, he will face murder and terrorism, political violence charges related to political violence, which do carry the death penalty if they choose to seek it, and there's no doubt that they would seek it in this case.
I know you've been in touch with all kinds of different sources in law enforcement, and I'm just wondering, it appears right now that he acted alone. That's still your impression?
Yeah, right off the bat, there were questions about that because there were 2 different crime scenes and there was no way to know if this is the same person at each scene. And so they don't want to rule anything out. And so that's kind of how they approached it from the beginning. But there never was indication that there was a second person involved. They just didn't want to completely rule that out yet. And when it came to the question of this vehicle, his so-called getaway vehicle, the presumption is that he may have made it to that North Minneapolis house on foot. It was about a 7-mile walk from Brooklyn Park to that house, which would take about 2.5 hours for an average person to walk, which fits the timeline if he made it back to that house at about 6 a.m. after the, 3:30 confrontation with the officer after the shootings in Brooklyn Park. And so the timing would make sense if he could make it to that house on foot. He had to get a car one way or another, whether that car, the Be on the Lookout that went out said that the Buick that they were looking for was registered to a different person. We don't know if this is somebody, and they were labeled as person of interest, which sometimes can mean suspect, but sometimes just somebody they want to talk to.
Like we just want to talk to you because your car is currently being used by this suspect.
And that's all. That this person's vehicle, it was registered in this other person's name.
And we don't know if it was stolen or if he knew the person and had permission to use it.
Those are all questions right now.
And we do know that his wife was questioned about 10:30 yesterday morning.
Yeah, and by question,
11.
that's another thing where we don't know the extent of. Like, we don't know if she sat down in an interrogation room and answered, all the questions that they wanted to ask, or if they stopped her on the side of the road or outside of the gas station in Onamia and did a search of the vehicle and asked her, a few different questions and then let her go. Like, we just don't know all the granular details of the investigation. We know things in broader strokes. So
there are a lot of rumors on social media about what was found in the vehicle. Is there something that if they would have found in the vehicle in your experience with law enforcement, that they would have said, we're taking you in, we're not letting you go?
That could have been. I mean, there's some people.
But they didn't take her in.
There's some sources that I've shared what I've heard with them, and they would, in their responses, well, I'm surprised they didn't arrest her. But
we also don't know.
She's not charged. She's not accused of anything right now, so we have to tread lightly on that. It's just simply an open question. Did he share information with her? And and I don't know how much would be a crime if he did share it with her and she didn't report it. I'm not sure if that would be a crime. So it's hard to say, what involvement, if any, she has. It's just part of the investigation right now.
Okay, and lots of rumors. And as soon as we can confirm any of it, we will report it to you. Easy to post rumors online, of course. Well, let's talk about that Buick. It looks like, you said it's a Buick that was found in Sibley County this morning. Dispatch call went out around 6 a.m. saying they believe they saw the suspect's car. Our Joe McCoy has been on the scene for hours. And Joe, when you first arrived on that scene, it was not cordoned off. It was not blocked off like it is now. Can you describe what you saw when you first arrived? I mean, you were able to walk right up to that cowboy hat.
Yep, exactly, Julie. When we first arrived, State Patrol was on scene, Sibley County Sheriffs were on scene, and there was a considerable law enforcement presence. But as you just mentioned, my photographer and I, we drove right up to the scene. We were able to take a picture of that cowboy hat. We were able to, see the car, shoot video of that black Buick, and so that all happened. And then I would say about 15 minutes later is when this perimeter was set that has seemed to only grow throughout the morning and early afternoon. We're now hearing that that perimeter here on Highway 25 is 2 miles long. So that is an extremely large perimeter, Julie. Of course, law enforcement not allowing reporters or the public to get anywhere near what is going on in that scene. And I do have a kind of an interesting tidbit. I was just talking with some neighbors who live to the property directly next to the property that is being searched right now. I asked them, when did you first see that Buick arrive on scene? And the guy who I spoke with, he said that they did not see that Buick there last night. They first saw it this morning. I think he said it was around 7 o'clock. So when they got up and kind of were getting ready to go to church, they saw that black Buick. He did say, Julie, that a window was busted out of that black Buick, and it looked like in the front of the vehicle. So we're trying to put together this time frame from witnesses and people who live nearby and any word from law enforcement about when exactly that black Buick got there. And as Lou has been mentioning, we do not know if that black Buick is registered to that suspect, Vance Belter in this case, but we do know from authorities that this is a car that is related to this investigation that they believe Belter was driving. So I think Lou has been bringing up great questions that I've had as well of how Belter got from Representative Hortman's home in Brooklyn Park and then got to Minneapolis. As Lou was mentioning, it certainly fits in a time frame where he could have walked that 7 miles. Did he potentially get in another car? Did he maybe Uber somewhere, to get to North Minneapolis? And then when he was in North Minneapolis and then ended up here in Green Isle, how did he get there? Was it all driven by this black Buick? whose car is this? All of these questions that we still have, Julie. And the law enforcement presence here has not dwindled down at all. It's ratcheted up throughout the afternoon, and within the past hour or hour and a half, we haven't seen any more law enforcement, but there are multiple SWAT teams down there. There are multiple K9 units down there. There was at one time a bomb squad, but we did see that bomb squad leave the property. So that just gives everyone an idea of the police presence that we are seeing down here. And I did talk with one woman, Julie, she received a message from the BCA about 45 minutes ago saying, we are about to search your property. You need to leave your property. We're going to bring in, these tactical teams to search your property. So as of this moment, I can actually see the lady right there. She's still here. So I don't believe that she has gotten a message yet that she can then go back to her home. So this is the kind of impact this is having on this rural community in Green Isle. Not only have dozens of people driven by and asked us, hey, what's going on? Do you know if they've caught him yet? All those questions, a lot of curiosity. There's also, people's Sunday afternoons are being uprooted because they're being asked to leave their homes so tactical teams can come and search their property. That same woman that I talked to, I asked her to describe her feelings. She said simply disbelief of what is happening here. This is, of course, unprecedented here in Green Isle. She says she doesn't really feel scared anymore, but she did say last night she felt scared because she knew that suspect's property, Belter's property that he owned here in Green Isle, was about 5 miles away. So, of course, this community here in Green Isle, which is less than 600 people, they are on edge about this suspect here in this case, potentially roaming around their community, someone that police has said you need to be cautious of. He could be armed and dangerous. And then this morning around 10:45, we received those emergency alerts that people need to stay inside their home, make sure to stay safe. So this community, of course, on edge as this scene, we have not had any signal yet that this scene is dying down at all. We still do not know yet if law enforcement is going to hold a press conference later this afternoon or later this evening. We have not been able to receive any word from law enforcement besides when we initially arrived on scene here at 8:45, and the only thing State Patrol told us at that time was that black Buick was a car of interest, so that it has now been confirmed that car was being driven by the suspect, Vance Belter. But that's the only question we've been able to have answered from law enforcement here on the scene in Green Isle, Julie.
Oh, that's some really interesting new information, Joe. Thanks so much. It's some good reporting. That's interesting that front window was broken on the Buick. That's
what it looks like on the photo we're seeing, Joe, so that matches.
And then also that they are getting alerts to leave their homes so that they can be searched. That has got to be an alarming text to get. And it hadn't occurred to me that, of course, the people that live in Green Isle had a really long night last night and were scared because they know that home is so close to their properties. But it's such a small community, Joe. Have you come across anyone that knows Vance Belter or his wife?
I have not, Julie. No, I have not, Julie. And even that neighbor that I was talking to who lives to the nearest property, to the property that they are searching, he, had no idea what was going on. That's the same neighbor that we've been running some sound from, where he said he heard a couple of what he believed to be gunshots last night. I do want to be clear, though, Julie, I just talked to that man again. It's his belief that those gunshots are unrelated to what is going on here. Of course, that is just, his thoughts. So, that is not any official word, but that is what that man says. But I have talked to numerous people here in the community, even people today in Green Isle and in the community as they've been driving by asking us questions. No one seems to know Vance Belter or his wife, or have really ever interacted with him. I talked to a woman who works at a counter at the BP gas station in town. She's worked at that counter for many years. She said she saw the picture on the news of Belter and never seen him before. His name didn't sound familiar. So it's interesting. And we also don't know how much time Vance Belter spent here in Green Isle, because we know, as we've learned through our reporting, that he spent a couple of nights a week at that North Minneapolis home that he was renting out with his friends / roommates. So we don't know how much time he was spending in Minneapolis versus how much time he and his family were spending here in Green Isle. But yeah, I think that community aspect, Julie, in Green Isle is just another layer to this story, another community on edge. Of course, yesterday Brooklyn Park was on edge because they had that shelter in place, for a lot of the afternoon. And now Green Isle, even though there wasn't an emergency alert last night or shelter in place, people are wondering, is this man potentially roaming our community? And if he is armed and dangerous, could we be in danger? So there's just so many layers tragic layers, I should say, Julie, to this story.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. The text that his roommate claimed came from him seemed very apologetic, and even said, "I made some bad decisions." That's the way he paraphrased one of the texts to one of our reporters. And you know, the best thing he could do right now is turn himself in so that people can once again rest easy. We sure hope that this comes to a conclusion soon. Lou, did you have any other questions for Joe?
I don't have a question for Joe, but I do have some more context involving the Buick, and good for Joe to listen in as well. So yesterday, you know, the authorities released information that they want the public to know for their own safety and to help them solve the crime. They hold back some information because it might not help if it goes public. And one bit of information I got yesterday is that he was thought to be driving a Buick. They didn't release that information, presumably because if he knows that they're looking for a Buick, it would just change cars,
Yeah.
and then they can't find him again. So when we heard last night that this Be on the Lookout in South Dakota went out for a Buick, it matched that information. I'm going to just read what information went out to South Dakota authorities. It said, be on the lookout for Minnesota license, and then the plate number, for a maroon 2025 Buick 4-door registered to another person. And it said that this other person may be traveling with the person involved in the homicide. And so that's what went out to law enforcement. From the picture, it appears to be black, but you know, it's hard to tell. And some details such as color are things that, you know, what I always call fog of war reporting, where, you know, the color might get reported differently than what it really is. So it's hard. It's, you know, we can only presume that it is the exact same car from what they were looking for last night that's registered to this other man's name. What we do know for sure is that authorities believe this is the vehicle that you're looking at right now that Vance Belter, the shooting suspect, was driving.
Yeah, and interesting to note, when we first saw that image, it did look to me like that window was broken. Now we confirmed that that front window had been broken. And so just another piece of the puzzle that if he was in fact walking around in North Minneapolis trying to find a vehicle, perhaps this is one that he found.
And you know, he and his wife bought that rural property there in Green Isle in 2023. So
Relatively recently.
They've only been there a couple of years. It's not out of the ordinary that people in town wouldn't know who he is.
Right. With 5 children though. And they seem to be, from the videos that he himself put out on social media, faith seemed to be a big part of their lives.
Yeah.
As you know, you heard Joe saying the neighbor that saw that car sitting there at 7 a.m. getting up to go to church, you just wonder, were they members of any kind of congregations? Even if they've been there, you know, if they've been there for 1.5 years or 2 years, it's still a large family to move into a small area.
Yep.
So lots of unanswered questions for sure. But as Joe mentioned, you know, that community in Green Isle, there's a lot of fear last night because they knew he had a property nearby and that he was still on the loose. You know, and in Brooklyn Park and in Champlin, of course, a lot of fear yesterday as well. We talked to neighbors about what they saw and experienced as yesterday's events unfolded. Here's Ian Russell.
In the wake of tragedy,
it was pretty intense, yeah, pretty scary.
Compassion remains.
Like, know the Hoffmans, like they give king-size or full-size candy bars out at Halloween. Yeah, like they're real nice, personal.
An early morning attack in Champlin.
I can think like pop, 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 right? For sure 3.
Shaking the neighbors of State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette.
I mean, things can happen anywhere, but when it's just literally that close to home, it's kind of nerve-wracking a little bit.
Police say 57-year-old Vance Belter started his attacks on lawmakers at the Hoffman home, disguised as law enforcement.
I just saw it. It looked like a police car.
Just a few miles away in Brooklyn Park,
it's hard to see today.
Actual police took that car, left after Belter shot and killed Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark.
Yeah, we got to know each other, you know, really well over the last few years. You know, so this is definitely heartbreaking.
Here, though, it was never Representative, only Melissa and Mark.
We never talked politics. We just talked about our dogs and the weather and how things were in the neighborhood.
Corey Leaf says he'll miss that.
Happy. And that's how we always thought of them.
In the wake of tragedy, compassion holds on tight.
Devastating. It's wrong. It shouldn't have happened.
Even as pain stays close by.
I want people to remember them just as great people, not as a Democrat or not as a Republican, just they were great people.
Ian Russell.
A big devastating loss.
KARE 11 News.
You're hearing from neighbors and people that knew Melissa Hortman not as the powerhouse DFL lawmaker and leader that she was, but just as a friend and a neighbor. She had been the top Democratic leader in the State House since 2017. And if you may recall, she led Democrats in that 3-week walkout at the beginning of this year's very contentious session when the House came in evenly divided. She ended up being the person at the helm of her party to try to figure out how to lead with the Republicans in an evenly divided House. They ended up coming up with a power sharing agreement, and she turned the gavel over to Representative Lisa Demuth, and she assumed the title Speaker Emerita. Hortman used her position as Speaker in 2023 to champion expanded protections for abortion rights, including legislation to solidify Minnesota's status as a refuge for patients or for people who lived in more restrictive states. They could then travel here to Minnesota to get an abortion. And she also was instrumental in protecting the providers of abortion in the state. Senator John Hoffman was 60 years old. He was first elected in 2012 as chair of the Senate and was chair of the Senate Human Services Committee. That oversees one of the biggest parts of the state budget. He and his wife, Yvette, have one daughter. Her name is Hope. She came out of that shooting unscathed because of her mother, Yvette, who we understand threw herself on top of her daughter to protect her. Both Senator Hoffman and his wife sustained multiple gunshot injuries. We know they did already come out of surgery last night. Last night, we were told Senator Hoffman was in a wait-and-see situation. His wife, Yvette, this morning updating, saying that he is doing okay, still has a long road ahead of him. Fortunately, all those bullets for both the senator and his wife missed major organs. But as you can imagine, if you're shot 8 or 9 times, it's a long road of recovery ahead. So our thoughts and prayers are with them this morning as they recover in the hospital. Mm-hmm. And so you're working on some breaking news.
I do have a bit of breaking news, kind of related but tangential to this entire story. So the trial of State Senator Nicole Mitchell was set to get underway tomorrow with jury selection up in Detroit Lakes in Becker County. Oh, wow. Of course, that's the high-profile burglary case where she's accused of breaking into her stepmother's home. Her stepmother's home.
After her father had passed away. So Senator Mitchell's father had died, and it's the understanding she was breaking in because she was saying her stepmother wouldn't turn over some sentimental items for her. Yeah. She's accused of breaking in. She says she was going to check on her stepmother, who she said has Alzheimer's.
And so as of right now, the jury selection is not going to start tomorrow as planned, and we expect to learn more shortly or possibly tomorrow as far as how long it's going to be postponed. But it's because of the assassinations.
Because emotions are so high, and people are maybe thinking it's not the right state of mind for potential jurors to be in?
We don't have the rationale, but just because of the shootings, they are at least postponing it. It's not going to start tomorrow.
All right. Let's go out to Ian Russell. He is live in Sibley County for us with some new information. Ian?
Hey, Julie and Lou. Yeah, we're on 301st right now. We are north of State Highway 25 here. You should be looking at a shot right now. It's about as close as we can get. Probably about 3/4 of a mile to a mile here. They have a car open just because of the distance. I'm not entirely sure if it's the Buick we've been talking about or what, but there's a lot of law enforcement, I believe you can see there, kind of taking a look at some things. On the left side of your screen, if I'm kind of painting the picture in my mind here, I walked away from the camera because there's a lot of folks over here kind of looking at this same scene. There were some officers, some law enforcement, looked like a K-9 unit kind of walking through what I believe is a soybean field, kind of on the left side there. And, like I said, this is pretty far down the road. That's you should be looking at all the way down there at the back end should be State Highway 25, which is kind of in the middle section of where Joe has been. And when we were on the sort of that western edge earlier in the afternoon, that's kind of where things have been concentrated. But as you can see, just a lot of law enforcement down there kind of taking a look at that car. I believe from here, looks like it has all of its doors open. Some folks are still kind of poking around out there, but this is kind of the first time we've been able to see here kind of what's going on in this middle section on 25. Lou, I think you had said it was about 2 miles of 25 that's closed off here. So this is sort of that first look into that middle section where a lot of that activity, I believe, has been concentrated. Obviously, we've seen some folks kind of on that western edge with some state patrol officers going through, checking on things, checking on houses, things like that. But like I said, we're on 301st right now, looking down towards where that car is and sort of getting our first look at what that looks like.
Okay, and Ian, this is Lou. Thanks for your reporting. That's great information there. So the spot where you're looking south on 301, is that correct?
Yes, we are just north, if I get my directions here right. I believe we're just north of it. I'd say
yes.
Probably.
And so, for your reference, the road is blocked 1 mile in each direction of that spot. So that is the center of where the road is blocked off. And if that indeed is the Buick that they are now opening up and searching, it could be because they needed that time to get a judge to write a search warrant and for a judge to approve a search warrant before they go in. And so, you know, everything there would seem to make sense. And that you're right, that looks exactly like the center of the investigation right now as we see it.
Yeah, and you can see.
And I'm sorry, like you said, I mean, it's far, right? It's far down the road, so it is difficult to tell what that is. But it looks like a dark-colored sedan-style vehicle that we can see on that right side of the road with the doors open over there.
Yeah, and you can see officers, and it looks like some canine units coming out of that field that is to the left of the car. And this is all happening right now